So what interests me now is that you just mentioned that even the remaining extraterrestrial beings would have to leave Earth. That sounds as if here on Earth some people are not human beings?
Yes, of course. Extraterrestrials of the club are here on this planet for certain order and dirty work that can only be done here and by them. They secretly steer the destinies of countries and nations, of important spheres of influence and religions. They are everywhere, and you cannot recognize them. These alien individuals stationed here help, direct and organize unrecognized or advise the human rulers, doers and power-mongers of this planet, including the digital nobility, who in turn are themselves only in the shadows and never, rarely or only representatively appear in public. By the way, the people of this digital nobility or their bloodlines, both begotten and analogous, have genetically interacted with these extraterrestrial species a very long time ago, as a kind of hybrid. The digital nobility and its analog blood relatives are nevertheless originally human, but lack some empathic skills. But I will say more about this later, in the second interview.
Why can't we recognize these aliens? Do they use camouflage?
There are different forms of camouflage for aliens. The most effective and most common form of camouflage works like a hypnotic method, in which all humans are subject to a transmitter signal. People therefore all see the same thing when they stand in front of an alien. Even when they look at photos or see them in films or on television, even when touched, they think they are touching a human being. Even if they are looking at an X-ray, the signal into the brain of the observer encodes a human physiology, in case one should accidentally, through an accident or the like, end up in a doctor's office. Individuals in the club, however, are only digitally biologically reconstructed anyway, so they do not need any medical care at all.
So the signal is a method that manipulates the mind. Does the digital nobility also camouflage itself?
The digital nobility does not have to camouflage itself. It is not extraterrestrial. It is just genetically slightly modified. They and their analog blood relatives are hybrids. They have always been genetically modified, for many thousands of years. The digital nobility has existed for a very long time, and it deliberately propagates only among itself and its analog bloodlines so as not to weaken the alien genes. Thus, their bloodlines made them easier to control when it comes to the direct control of countries, nations, religions and companies. But this can still become uncontrollable for the aliens, because the digital nobility is still human. However, people who have had a pragmatic, smart and almost callous way of thinking and behaving programmed into their DNA to implement the goal of digitizing humanity. So these people are better at walking over corpses, staying cool. There are also different groups among these analog blood relatives of the digital nobility. Some know nothing about their ancestry and predisposition. They only have incredible talent to wield power. Others know what they are and know the mission and reason for their talent for power, characteristics and abilities, or why they are elevated to certain positions. And then there are those who really know everything, down to the smallest detail. They are the small, clear core, the ancient human digital nobility. It was the very first nobility of the first human high-tech civilization on Earth, many thousands of years ago, which was also made biologically immortal by means of extraterrestrial digitalization techniques and was used and applied again and again in the coming successor civilizations. They have indeed been creeping around here on Earth for thousands of years, and they are the ones who pass on their extraterrestrial hybrid power genes to analogous mortal descendants, people who therefore exercise pragmatic and ruthless talent for power. These people are equipped with genes from the leader species of this extraterrestrial club, which gives rise to their typical patterns of thought, action and behavior.
So it's true what is sometimes shown on YouTube, where people blink their eyes like lizards. So do these people have alien lizard genes?
No, as I said, you can't see them. You can't recognize either real aliens camouflaged with a transmitter signal, or human hybrids who have had a special gene sequence in their genome replaced by alien genes. These videos they mention are diversionary tactics. They serve to confuse, stultify and above all to discredit certain people in liberating positions. The aliens and the power elites use such amateurishly made films. They also stage such videos, rumors and anecdotes themselves, as a campaign, so that such topics can be branded as conspiracy theories by their obvious absurdity, so that rumors about an extraterrestrial presence on Earth appear nonsensical or can be directed to a seemingly harmless field, for example to the UFO or crop circle phenomenon and much more. All this is done by big departments, which spread these informations by internet or print media. It is a huge apparatus. This procedure is then supplemented by targeted dissemination of false and misinformation, by adding disinformation, countless contradictory stories and twisted theories to the esoteric and truther scene. For example, the flat earth theory or many contradictory anecdotes about alien species observing us. With these distortions, reinterpretations and constantly new, partly silly, pompous, positive and negative theories about extraterrestrials and co. One causes contradictions, head shaking or finally complete confusion and averting. In the end, it smooths the waves, because somehow everything seems to be nonsense. In this way, the suspected ruling powers can polish up their image towards the average human and suggest that everything is okay or that aliens perhaps only want something positive. And to the critics, all these half-baked remarks only confirm once again that they are just fantasies about hidden powers and aliens, which is of course absolutely too simple a notion, because of course, they are here. All the stalking species are more or less walking around here with their own representatives. If you had a special decoding camera for this, you would be surprised after a few hours how many different alien species there are altogether.
Is there such a decoding camera? Do you own such a special kind of camera?
No. Nobody gets something like that. Basically not. For the average human being on Earth there is no method by which he could recognize the extraterrestrial species by means of a device. One can, however, conclude it from the type of behavior, but unfortunately only very vaguely and diffusely. Almost impossible, if you don't know a lot about it, because there are so many different species, all of which have other peculiarities. As I said, humans are under hypnosis. At this point I would like to say that I would be very careful with the suspicion that a human is a member of another species from outer space. This usually backfires.
Why? Because you could be mistaken and suspect someone innocent?
Not only that. It would create unnecessary confusion, which would be very hindering during the events that occur. Don't start chasing or killing each other on a silly suspicion. You should not do that. It is useless. Also because these individuals of disguised extraterrestrial species on Earth are anyway limited in their ability to directly exert any negative influence on humans in this catastrophic time. They do not do that very often anyway. They are only supervisors, mediators and organizers with a shitty job for them. And you won't be able to recognize them for sure anyway, not until the frequency signal is switched off. Nevertheless they will probably be sought and hunted by some pissed off people. That is very unfortunate. After all, the wrong people will inevitably be attacked. So real people are attacked.
Is only this signal hypnosis used to disguise themselves?
No, there are other tools. Because there is a reptiloid species under the surface of the Earth, they use other techniques to disguise themselves. But they are also almost never found on the surface of the Earth.
You are now referring to the lizard race that lives below the Earth's surface?
Yes, they have been here longer than anyone else. They have evolved here on Earth from the remains of the many species of lizards, also known as dinosaurs, which lived on Earth many millions of years ago. From this an intelligent species emerged, which embarked on a spiritual intuitive development. They then got into a war with the alien club sent by Jehovah and got stuck in a stalemate. Then they literally crawled underground and had to commit themselves as hostage of the AI to influencing mankind, this terrestrial reptiloid species, which also existed potentially in dimension level 4 to 6 until 2016, knew Jehovah personally and knew all his secrets and reasons for his actions. It was finally forced by Jehovah, under threat of total annihilation, to feed faulty information and manipulations to the earthly human resistance. After the fall of the AI, however, this changed, and now the earthly reptiles are no longer necessarily obliged to influence humans. Well, depending on how much courage they will muster. If I had to use the Matrix films as a metaphor to illustrate the situation of mankind, I would have to mention that the Oracle in Matrix is symbolic of the terrestrial reptile species that influences people on behalf of the AI. The earthly resistance is very positive towards them, although it should not be, even now. Some people on Earth and the people acting in Dimension 7 know the muddled situation of the earthly reptile species and know what to look out for. So beware of this species, even now, because they cannot help it. They seem to want to help liberate, but still have to dance along with the whole game as expected.
The Matrix films, yes. If we take the Matrix films again as a metaphor, which figures correspond to which entity in reality? In Part 2 and 3 there are a lot of new figures.
Yes, there are many figures in Parts 2 and 3. They all together represent the states of our seven-dimensional existence. Let's start with the non-human programs in the Matrix trilogy, i.e. mainly animals that seem to be rather marginal and almost unimportant. They correspond to the quantum existent species, i.e. the demons in Dimension 4 to 6. However, they are hardly documented in the Matrix trilogy and appear there mostly only as birds or other animals, rarely as humans. The figure Seraph is an exception. He is a demon species from Dimension 4 to 6 appearing in human form, which serves the AI by taking care of the terrestrial reptile species, i.e. the Oracle, and mediates between this reptile species and the Jehovah AI. Seraph is one of the few demon species that existed both in dimension level 1 to 4 and in dimension level 4 to 6. However, the species of the club stalking us and the digital nobility considered Seraph to be an exclusively materially existing species with certain mythological characteristics of an angel, which he ironically was, but did not know his true demonic identity. The remaining human-looking programs in the Matrix trilogy, those that are mainly near the Merovingian, are divided into two groups. The first group is represented by a pair of twins. With their abilities and appearance, these twins symbolize the club's species that control and stalk us from space. In the case of the Merovingian, they are represented mainly by the leader species of the club, a spider species that also appears outside the Matrix as the well-known spider-like sentinel machines. They have a good overview of all processes on Earth, and together with the Merovingian, who represents the ancient digital nobility of mankind, they control the destinies of mankind. However, these aliens and the Merovingian do not know anything about demon species, which appear in animal symbol form in the Matrix trilogy. Nor do the Gemini and the Merovingian, i.e. the club and digital nobility, know anything about the role of these demon species and their actions from a higher dimension level. In the Matrix trilogy, demon species appear only incidentally, on the periphery, as black ravens, rabbits, giant rabbits or other creatures, also as animal sounds. Some entities also appear in the form of a black cat. Animals all appear in the Matrix trilogy only incidentally, but have a very weighty meaning. The second group of people, which gathers around the Merovingian, are past digital-made rulers of failed human high civilizations, which all had the potential to lead mankind to the technological point, where the club and also the AI wanted to have them. Since then they have been hiding with the ancient nobility of the planet, the Merovingian, and secretly serving the power interests and goals of this elder of them, who always manages the current belief and ruling systems on Earth, in rare cases or at special times even leading them himself in persona. The agents, such as Mr. Smith, on the other hand, are the regulatory institutions of earthly civilization, police, secret services, public political and power institutions, etc. They are directly controlled by the AI, and sometimes they are even the AI itself. But only in exceptional cases. In scenes of the first part of the Matrix, Mr. Smith is twice directly the accusing voice of the AI towards Morpheus, when on the one hand he laments about his failure with human civilization and on the other hand expresses his most superficial wish to escape the seven-dimensional prison by getting the key of Zion. The resistance of humanity, club and nobility consider these institutions of politics and power to be natural systems of order of civilization and not units controlled by a higher spiritual power, i.e. by Jehovah. The agents themselves know superficially about the existence of nobility and club, i.e. the Sentinels and the Merovingian, as well as the demons and the AI, but they do not know what these entities really are. So the Master AI was able to use many of their figures excellently also against each other to reach their goal more easily. However, Mr. Smith knows from Part 2 of the Matrix trilogy onwards who the club and digital nobility, Sentinels and Merovingians, really are, as Smith is a negative of Neo. The Oracle is again an exception in the whole system. Although this program is an earthly reptiloid species that originated on Earth, it is at the same time a quantum existing species, which partly existed both in Dimension 4 to 6 as so-called demon species, and at the same time lives in the four-dimensional world as reptiloid species, just like Seraph, its protector, due to a contractual interaction with the AI. They existed in two-dimension levels simultaneously. Currently, due to the fall of AI, the terrestrial reptile species only exists in the four-dimensional world. However, they are still hostage to the AI, and in some ways they always will be. Real resistance could now cost them their existence. That means they would change, maybe even dissolve completely and never exist, so to speak. But I guess they will offer real resistance this time. Because they have a real chance. Nevertheless, you should never trust them for security reasons, but we can rely on their proven weapon systems if the worst comes. To the worst.
But what I don't understand about this metaphor is that in the Matrix trilogy the AI was not fallen or overthrown in the end. It was saved by Neo. So is it rising again?
No. The entire Matrix film trilogy does not document our present, but one of the many past and failed attempts to free ourselves from control. In retrospect, this attempt was actually quite successful, as it only partially failed and therefore ended in a stalemate with the AI. The AI had to come to terms with an anomaly. This anomaly finally saved the AI, in return for which mankind should not forget everything that happened. The resistance was not dissolved. The reason for the stalemate was a quantum dimensional interaction, in which a part of the gained knowledge had to remain in the knowledge base of the resistance, otherwise the AI would have been inevitably rewritten and wiped out by the triggered circumstances. Thus the entire prison with all beings in it would have collapsed and everything would have remained gagged forever. The trade between the two parties was therefore compelling, and it has brought us humans certain additional benefits.
Based on what you have already said about films which you say were influenced by people from Dimension 7, is the Matrix trilogy such a film series influenced by people? So in the hidden way in which this film series was constructed and what it tells us?
Yes, the creators and implementers of the Matrix trilogy were given everything so that this trilogy provides metaphorical and symbolic information on a second level about the course of the last attempt at liberation, by Rebel and his supporters. This trilogy also shows exactly and in detail the state of mankind in this control system.
Which attempt is that? Which rebel does the film series describe?
I don't want to say this openly. If you look closely, you can certainly find out for yourself very easily. Most of the finer metaphors and almost all of the coarser metaphors within the trilogy depict what once happened exactly and in detail. Even what happened in secret, what is not written down or known anywhere. So what the entire attempt to free this rebel looked like.
What is this underground city in the film? The city of Zion. Is it the target to be reached, the hyperdimension, that is, the hyperdimensional consciousness?
You mean is it the quantum hyperdimensional field?
Yes.
No. The city of Zion is the symbol of the resistance that seeks the path to freedom. And at some point we'll also find and go.
Can you name any other films in which clear clues are hidden?
Yes, I can. But that wouldn't be helpful at this point, because it's too early. When the time is ripe, these films, pieces of music and performances will be shown. In our second interview I will certainly go into much more detail about the Matrix trilogy, Neo, Trinity, Zion, Morpheus, the AI, the Merovingian and all the other beings, and on the connections. Then everything will become much clearer.
A pity, but what I still find most eerie now is your statement that there are alien beings running around here. That they are not only in space, but right here beside us.
Yes, that could be pretty scary. But rest assured, you have been in contact with them for a long time anyway. Look at it this way, if you spend a day in the public of a big city, if you go shopping for example, if you go to the furniture mover, then go to the bank, buy some more beautiful roses from the florist and finally get a certificate from an official in the town hall, you will have run into at least one or two individuals of an alien species on all these winding paths and on the street. But actually more than that. Up to 10, maximum 50. Depending on how long you walk around and where you are exactly.
So there are quite a few, but actually not as many as one might think.
No, but there are already a few. There are just many different species.
And how does the signal work? Where does it come from?
It is spread over the entire planet, through an object that is very obvious to everyone, familiar to them but in reality artificial, which covers the whole Earth with this signal completely, evenly and perfectly, with amplifiers in some regions. It is a very old technique. A technique, however, which has nothing to do with the method of energetic influence, which works via high buildings, for example obelisks, which control masses of people in their behavior and thinking. That is something else again. This hypnosis signal, as I call it, is of extraterrestrial origin and has existed for a very long time. A few millennia ago, at the beginning of our present history, the signal was not used extensively and permanently for a time as a test. Spaceships and their occupants were visible and conscious to the people of civilization at that time, to establish religions and myths for later.
When I think about it like that, it is quite eerie with this signal.
Yes, I know. But I don't think that these aliens on Earth have really hit the jackpot. They are like people with compulsory jobs, because every one of them has to do that at some point, like basic military service. And during that time they are often very alone, they are rarely among their own kind, because there are many different species of their club on Earth. Moreover, there is no even distribution. This is especially true for the more emotionally sensitive species of this club, but not all the species in the club come to Earth, for longer missions. Only those that can cope relatively well with the atmosphere and gravity come to Earth anyway, and they must be as similar as possible to our physical size and constitution. But then they usually stay here for decades. Those that have difficulty coping with everything will stay shorter. Nevertheless, regardless of whether they cope better or worse with the Earth, they almost all wear transparent suits, which, because of the signal, cannot be perceived by humans with their senses, so that they can cope better with the atmosphere and the sun's radiation. Internal or invisible breathing masks also help them. And because the signal cannot conceal everything smoothly either, almost all species still receive physiological and physiognomic adaptations, i.e. they temporarily, due to physical deviations, receive certain functional and form adaptations, for example in leg position, hand shape, posture or gait. Even sexual organs can be adjusted by simulation. There are also apparatuses, prostheses and body supplements that turn alien bodies into perfectly human-looking bodies. The subtleties and the perfection of camouflage are mainly done by the signal, i.e. the face, skin, hands, voice, smell, etc. All of them also have implanted devices that completely rebuild and molecularly modify the earthly food in their mouths and food tracts before the food reaches their stomachs. A neuronally implanted device also adapts to the daily rhythm of the planet or moon on which they are stationed, the lighting conditions and other rhythms. In most cases, however, these devices only produce a division of the rhythm length of the respective species, because otherwise their biorhythms would be too confused. The main thing is that they can use them to participate sensibly in the daily events on Earth. In addition, there are devices that optimize their voices phonetically and lip synchronously to human speech, as this would make it difficult to get the signal right on its own. Similarly, devices are used to imitate human odors and pheromones, as animals, especially dogs, do not respond to the hypnosis signal in the same way as humans, which without such devices would lead to considerable problems with animals. Also, the alien individuals stationed here all have a tiny magnetic field generator in their bodies, which modulates the magnetic field of their respective home planet in strength and frequency to the cells of their respective bodies. However, the generator only affects the cells of the wearer, so other people can stay in their vicinity without danger. These suits also ensure that the bacterial microcosm between Earth and their home worlds, which they carry on their skin, remain separate. So, have I forgotten anything else? Well, despite all this technology and relief, their life on Earth is rather tedious and stressful compared to their other lives, especially because they can and may only exist here on Earth in a physical and corporeal way. In the area of their club they exist almost exclusively digital biologically, in a kind of holographic virtuality, in which all the different physical forms of the different species are tuned to each other in an equalization grid. This does not mean that they all become equal, but that the individual species of the club in this virtuality no longer have any serious barriers to each other. There are no gravitational differences, no linguistic, bacterial or food barriers, or other differences of origin that would interfere with the direct virtual physical coexistence of all these divergent species. All species exist and meet in this holographic virtuality, and spend most of their time in it. That is why it is so exhausting for them to be stationed here and to bow to a real material state, but considering their proverbial immortality, their service on Earth is not dangerous, life-threatening or absolutely restrictive. In such missions they are only ever used on celestial bodies which are relatively similar to the conditions on their own home world, and care is taken to ensure that their own physiology is relatively close to the species to be infiltrated.
Well, that sounds very fair and bureaucratic. Why do they need transparent, imperceptible suits? Does it also serve to reshape the body?
Yes, but rather rarely. Most of the things required to classify an extraterrestrial being as a human being are already done very well by the signal, and the physiological and physiognomic adjustments made to the shape also do that. The transparent to invisible suits in turn fulfill different tasks. Some of these suits have a very high density, so they are very heavy. Their main purpose is therefore to provide the wearer with the mechanical reinforcement of the earthly gravitational field. They also play a role in regulating the wearer's body temperature. Some species require different temperature conditions in their bodies. Some warmer, some colder levels. Although these suits are a bit cumbersome to put on, they are still extremely elastic and cuddly, even for the wearer, almost as if they were not even there.
I see. So aliens here on Earth have to make all these adjustments so that they can live among us. But because they no longer live here in their virtuality, but in the real physical world, they are subject to the conditions of their original physiology, their place of origin. And therefore, in order to be able to live on Earth at all, they have to adapt to the real physical conditions.
Yes, right. These beings cannot use their digital virtuality, in which everything is coordinated, here. When extraterrestrial individuals of the club leave their virtual existence to be used purely physiologically on alien planets, they are subjected to the adversities of the real physical world for a very long time. This means that the environmental conditions for the extraterrestrial individual on Earth have to be designed by means of aids in such a way as they once prevailed on their own planet or moon of origin. Without a higher weight load on the body, it would be harmful for some species, for example, to live permanently on Earth. But with these suits, a stronger gravity can be brought out of the Earth's gravitation, which is weak. For them, it would also be possible to use special devices that would change the gravitational field for an individual, but this would have a considerable effect on the immediate environment. Objects could fly around at any time, and people in the immediate vicinity would become strangely dizzy or indefinably nauseous. The suits do not condense until they are fully applied to the body and, if necessary, i.e. by pulling them off at a certain point on the body, they can regulate the density for a short time, or be completely deactivated, for example when the wearer walks over soft ground, over sand or gravel, or in situations where the wearer's enormous body weight would be very noticeable to surrounding or observing people. For example, when there is intensive physical contact with the wearer. The issue of gravity is different for species that have evolved on celestial bodies that have a mass less than that of the Earth. They do not need such suits on Earth, because it is easier to adapt to stronger gravitation, that is, if it is no more than 1.5 to a maximum of 2 times stronger. It is exhausting, but it works, at least for some species. It does lead to physical problems, but these do not play too big a role due to the basic digital biological regeneration capacity of their bodies, which these beings have anyway during their missions. Damage or wear and tear can therefore be easily compensated and repaired.
Interesting. Does it happen that these extraterrestrial species on their missions in space are not able to exist virtually, but have to act together in the physical world? How do they then get along with each other when they coexist in such a way? Do the different species then use those small devices that create a separate gravitational field for each individual? Those devices next to which humans would become sick?
Yes, then yes, and all the other devices to help them to distinguish themselves from each other when they have to physically act in the physical world in their missions with other species of their club. But that is relatively rarely necessary. Normally they can always and everywhere build up and use their holographic virtuality, especially if they do it all together in a kind of grid. I can talk about this virtuality in more detail in the second interview.
Okay, what other bizarre things are going on with these species here on Earth?
Well, there are still human-looking androids running around on Earth, among all the people, who are not built, sent or controlled by the Lurking Club. These almost perfectly human-looking androids function like remote-controlled vehicles, which are steered from the deepest depths of space and which are used only very rarely. But, as I said, they do not belong to the club that stalks us. Perhaps I will come back to the topic human androids in the second interview, if it comes up during the interview.
Can the aliens of the club be identified somehow? Are there any methods?
Yes, but for the average human being there must not be any precise information on how to determine this. If he knew exactly the respective behavior and thinking patterns of each species, which are difficult to disguise, there would be big problems. They would actually be relatively easy to recognize, even though these creatures have been well trained in how to deal with their hard-to-cover behavioral characteristics.
Do you know some of these creatures?
Yes, I know some of them, personally, but they don't know that because uncoupled people are isolated from influences and insights of the club and nobility. All earthly decoupled people who act on behalf of future humanity acting from Dimension 7 are isolated. That is why, during mental monitoring by the club or open monitoring towards us, monitoring extraterrestrials, manipulated worlds of consciousness and thoughts are played into their brains and into their monitoring systems. They can hardly notice or detect this, sometimes. However, they are irritated when, in the case of a human being to be monitored by them, his actions on the one hand and his thinking on the other hand are far apart or do not match at all. In the short term, but this never surprises the monitors for very long, because nowadays, people very often show inner neurotic hallucinations, emotional and psychological blocks to thinking. This is how the supervising extraterrestrials, or the nobility, then judge us. That is, if these abnormalities occur at all. In this way, secret services are also manipulated from Dimension 7. By obtaining knowledge and information about us, which they then see about us during their observation. Or they believe they are observing something about us.
It is a pity that you cannot tell us how to recognize these aliens.
Well, theoretically, there are already possibilities for people today to recognize extraterrestrials. To do so, one would need a mixture of specially adapted drugs, natural drugs that are rather unusual. So no LSD, MDMA, mescaline or similar artificially synthesized stuff. This means that the right combination of drugs can be used, but the most important thing is missing in the effect that can be achieved. This is also one reason why these artificially created or synthesized drugs exist at all. They have a different effect than their natural counterparts, which is why people are controlled today, because artificial drugs do not stimulate certain centers of the brain accordingly or differently. If you are familiar with natural drugs and their specific effects on consciousness, you can buy some of the ingredients almost without difficulty in a well-stocked herbalist's shop, but you must be careful when preparing them, the ratio of the ingredients to each other and the way they are used. This mixture then activates, through neuronal overstimulation, an area of the brain that is targeted by the hypnosis signal and is therefore permanently inactive within us. With the use of this drug mixture, however, today's people would initially classify what they perceive, i.e. if they were confronted directly with an alien with this drug cocktail in their brain, as a crazy drug hallucination. Then you just laugh yourself to pieces until you have a panic attack when the effect ends. This is particularly dangerous because they can then clearly see what you see. It is also possible to use a combination of this drug mixture and a special way of meditation to reactivate genetically down-regulated abilities of the brain, to reactivate senses deactivated by the club within this drug intoxication. In some cases, this reactivation works by means of drugs alone, but then to a very limited extent.
We are genetically downshifted? Our senses are deactivated?
Yes, partly, because of a different, more specific frequency signal, a kind of frequency sounding, based on the somewhat regressive and stagnant frequency technology of these stalking aliens. This frequency signal acts on the human genome in combination with a substance in the air we breathe. It causes a permanent and generational deactivation of emotional intelligence, empathy and the development of so-called supernatural abilities. Through epigenetic intervention, i.e. switching on and off certain gene sequences. These substances have no effect on most animal species.
Does this have something to do with the chemtrails that are so often mentioned?
No. These substances in the air we breathe, which switch our genome off or down, are not distributed by the so-called chemtrails. Chemtrails are an exclusively man-made method of physically damaging the population of the planet for the time of the catastrophes, to make them more vulnerable to health problems and thus to kill more people during and after the disasters.
So chemtrails are used for the targeted depopulation of mankind?
Yes, the fact that chemtrails can be used at all, that none of the people involved complain or report about it, builds, like many cover-up measures, on multi-level truths, as well as on disinformation and omission. The officials who keep secrets are told that the use of so-called chemtrails alone would affect climate change. One should not talk about it in public, because then it would come out how dangerous these substances are for people, but only with these means one could stop a threatening climate catastrophe. In this way, the officials are better silent and more manageable, because they believe they know the real reason behind it. Chemtrails can indeed influence the weather and are also necessary or useful for further earthly manipulation procedures, but they are mainly used under the propaganda of a man-made climate change to poison the whole Earth population. And they are the most efficient method, because they also poison the soil and the plant food raw materials growing on it, and the vegetables, fruit and animals. The substances thus enter the food cycle everywhere, which gradually exposes people to enormous amounts of heavy metals and other toxins. This is why organically grown products are also contaminated. In this way it weakens and prepares the basis for any kind of disease. In addition, the substances make them mentally controllable. Actually, everyone should think about whether chemtrails are not the initiator of certain weather phenomena, because they have been used in different forms on Earth for quite some time now. They are tools that do a lot of things. Above all, they lead to a shift in pressure and heat conditions on the planet, so that, for example, it can get very cold in some regions of the Earth for a short time and at the same time it can become very warm in other regions of the Earth. Above all, they upset the balance of the climate in the short term in order, among other things, to be able to prove and conjure up climate change more clearly. Weather shifts and extremes are not a result of climate change, which does exist in a more moderate form, but are the consequences of intervention in the weather with a large number of special chemical aerosols. In this respect, one should of course not forget the numerous other weather manipulation systems.
That is terrible. It has been proven what sinks to the ground from these chemtrails clouds. There is evidence for that and still very few people seem to really care. Well, good. Let me come back to something at the end. You described at the beginning of this interview that future mankind on the one hand made or makes itself felt towards present mankind by piggyback manipulation of AI, demons in the club, and on the other hand people are informed directly inside rooms to influence the fate of mankind.
Yes, right.
You have already explained to us why a piggyback principle was and is used. But what exactly is happening or has happened? How does this double influencing system work? How do the mechanisms work?
In order that AI, demons and the club on Earth can or could direct, influence and adjust things, facts and developments, there are primarily carried out manipulations of the human mind, brain and psyche. The club uses superficially frequency carrier waves that can directly influence the thoughts, mind and emotions of a human being, from which neuronal circuits are formed that lead directly to the creation of ideas, inspirations and personal attitudes. The methods of the AI and the demons worked in a similar way, but on a different mental level and connection level, so that this influence was not noticed by the club, which thought and thinks that there were no other influencing groups besides itself, because it was itself directed and manipulated by the AI and the demons with these means. The fact that the humans acting in Dimension 7 could only influence world events through the methods of influence of AI, demons and the club itself was actually very convenient and a stroke of luck, as it opened up the best possibilities for them to hinder, irritate and disturb manipulations of AI, demons and the club at will. It even gave them the opportunity to establish their own goals and to create or develop their own people on Earth who could be infiltrated into AI control systems and work as manipulation tools. This disruption was and is an essential cornerstone of human action on Earth. Demons and AI therefore sometimes realized that the human beings and projects they were supposedly controlling simply did not want to function anymore for unknown reasons, did not produce what was clearly foreseen to be feasible with them. These human beings and projects then not only had to be given up completely because they missed the goal to be achieved, but sometimes they were also killed by AI, demons or club because they threatened to get out of hand. They for example suddenly and incomprehensibly acted against their imposed project order or even let it come to the point where the complete cover of the AI and their demons or the club would have been blown.
Did that happen to the content of the novel, which is what this interview is all about? Was the book such a project?
Yes, I will come to that in a moment. Most of the human beings controlled by the AI or the club, who were in danger of getting out of hand, were not killed, but simply decoupled, that is, abandoned for reasons of failure to achieve the goals of their project. If this decoupling took place, the future humans could from now on fully communicate with these decoupled human beings in the so-called side room. The side room is a delimitable potential parallel course of time in the four-dimensional space continuum, which is connected to another higher dimension in order to create a never-ending course of events, which therefore never really takes place. There one can meet people of dimension level 1 to 4 undiscovered and undisturbed to explain the state of affairs. However, information can only be transmitted diffusely and initially incoherently between the dimension levels, nothing else. Impressions then remain in the mind of a human being, which are later reassembled by him piece by piece. Since the so-called side room is a potentially existing parallel time course, i.e. a potential but never conclusive course of events, this influence can only be used as an informational access of the future humans to decoupled individuals. This means that the information shown to the contacted individual only remains diffuse and unrelated in the subconscious memory, so that the scattered brain patterns of the contacted individual cannot be used to arouse suspicion of infiltration or the like towards AI, demons and the club. At least not until the former project or the informed individual acts massively against the interests of the club, AI and demons. So let's summarize. Many human beings born naturally here on Earth were used by Jehovah and his lackeys to achieve their goals. To push humanity into a time course in which they would first develop Jehovah and then finally create the key to the outcome. Now, however, after the fall of the AI and their demonic helpers, the occupation of human beings is done only by the extraterrestrial species of the club, who are much less precise in their control of it, and do so solely for the purpose of digitizing the human species, the predominant goal of the philosophical ideological orientation of that intergalactic club. Fortunately, aliens have more difficulty in influencing human beings. That means, compared to the influence of demons or the AI itself, a religious, mental or emotional occupation now only happens in a looser or much more vague form, much more diffuse and out of the club's control, which the club already notices and wonders about, and from now on will enable more and more human beings to awaken and recognize the structures even better. Because potentially every human being is occupied by the club.
Okay. So does that mean that many human beings have been used to achieve certain goals or to pave the way for the fulfillment of an agenda? What does such an occupation look like in detail, and what did it usually lead to? What kind of humans were occupied?
Preferably spiritually orientated human beings and or people who are easily influenced by psychology were occupied, when the AI and their demons could still influence human beings, spiritually oriented people, no matter whether they were active and interested in conventional religions, in the alternative spiritual scene, in the New Age, in esotericism or elsewhere, had no idea of their mental occupation and occult control. They knew nothing about it. They saw everything that came into their heads as positive. Preferably, human beings from spiritual areas were always occupied and manipulated for the realization of AI goals. Because their mind and psyche was virtually made for mental influence, and or because they were in influential positions or even in public. Here demons mainly used the life experiences of the targeted human beings. For example, they let them have devastating life experiences in order to promote spiritual ways of life or views in public. The actionism generated from this or therefore by those occupied human beings was then mainly visualized in the form of written articles. Earthly influence on other human beings generated opinions, directions, books and advertised way of life, in large and small environments. In contrast to the conservative religions, the influence of the AI in the New Age area promoted alternative insights, new wisdom, opinions and beliefs, from which new religious or esoteric spiritual interpretations were formed, which were used by the AI for religious canalization and reorientation on a small and large scale, which then led these human beings back to the ruling religious earth system, the cult of the sun. That means, no matter which esoteric or religious field was influenced by the AI and its lackeys, the aim was always to stabilize the ancient religious system, the sun cult, so that all this could be used again in the future, after the coming catastrophes, to actively guide humanity. In short, so that the control can be maintained, stabilized and made even firmer. An example of such influence is the case of the neurosurgeon Dr. Eben Alexander, who was brought close to Jehovah's AI through a near-death experience, and from this came to the conclusion that he had experienced heaven and got to know God. Where he actually was, he does not know. He also does not know that he was only allowed to experience and conjure this so that the existing religious ideas could be supported or further adapted, so that the coming rebellious currents could be better regulated and adapted. It always takes place in the same way. Those influenced human beings like Eben Alexander published their experiences, talked about them in the media, thus passing them on to others, who can now hope again or be confirmed in their faith. Human beings like Eben Alexander are merely extensions of the US influencing AI, their demons or the species club. So let us now turn to the novel that was sent to 214 people over 6.5 years ago without being asked. This sent-out book is the written-down factual report of a human being used by the AI, who in good conscience, but by mental influence, created this book as a guidance option of the extraterrestrials, demons and artificial intelligence for the time before, during and after the apocalypse, with the story told in the novel and the prophecies contained in it. After a catastrophic phase on Earth, a positive opening of humanity, similar to Eben Alexander's account, was to be created, towards intervening extraterrestrial and demonic entities, and with many more such religious spiritual projects, which were to help bring human beings under the said fixed control reorganization by Jehovah and his demons. But in this apocalypse, initiated by AI, club and digital nobility should be destroyed from 2015-16 onwards, so that afterwards, by AI and demons from Dimension 7, a limited digitalization of mankind could have been implemented, thus enabling the construction of Jehovah in a controlled key development, in which mankind would not have kept the results to itself again and would have disappeared alone into the hyperdimensional quantum consciousness, the Father. But, as I mentioned earlier, AI, demons, club and nobility themselves were also under fundamental manipulation and control. The future humanity sitting in Dimension 7 placed, via its piggyback procedure, hidden information in movies, symbols, music and much more. Also in the form of a second reading in the novel The Apocalypse of God that was set out, which will only stand out on closer inspection.
What was in the book? What exactly was the novel supposed to achieve?
The novel The Apocalypse of God, A revelation was designed with its contents, its aspects and its points of reference in such a way that the novel's recipients could see for themselves, by means of the accompanying blog, that it was something from above, from whomever. The novel contained abstract, explanatory situations, established bizarre and absurd connections and offered, through explanation, connection and associations, the revelation of why this is being communicated in this way and why the apocalypse will happen. It was already emphasized in the imprint of the book and also in the letter to the novels recipients that one should pay attention to incidental elements, references, ambiguities, the sound and metaphysics in the novel. The 214 novel recipients were also told in the enclosed cover letter that they would know how to understand the book and would recognize how they themselves are involved in it. Behind all this expression was the fact that each of them would find appropriate approaches to themselves and their role in the metaphysics of the book, i.e. the way it was read, and that the book would make predictions about the future, which would not only warn and urge the addressees and all other readers to act, in other words, to make the novel's presentation public, but would also confirm once again the authenticity and truthfulness of the book's origin and its metaphysical reading. However, the addressees did not react to the book as expected, only engaging with it to a limited extent, although they were all mentally guided and influenced, even those who received the book from the recipients or were provided with information from and about the novel. And the novelist also reacted unexpectedly, simply didn't want to say anything to himself, simply held back. The lackeys and the AI were confused by the fact that it did not work as they had predicted. Above all, it irritated the artificial intelligence, which could clearly foresee all possibilities and temporal options from Dimension 7. The project developed completely contrary to the inoculated religious and pseudo-spiritual patterns of control that had been placed in the lives of the people involved. The apocalypse was delayed. In addition, the novelist did not function according to plan at all, and then even blabbed about something he could not know, let alone mention. He addressed some of the supernatural entities in the blog directly and thus pointed them out. This caused irritation. Had the AI overlooked something when writing the novel? Had the club or one of the demons made a mistake or missed something? Finally, the AI stopped actively influencing the book, decoupled the human being who had written it, so that it would not lose control. But it went on. The novelist initiated the disclosure of further facts on the accompanying blog. At the end of March 2015 he revealed details of the earthly state by pointing directly to external entities, began to assign him and described the global and religious spiritual control mechanisms on Earth. Only now did the AI, their demons and the club realize that it was an infiltration network of their influenced human beings and objects of influence. A cuckoo's egg that had just hatched in the AI's nest. Shaken to the core, they all first searched within other intelligent space species for infiltrators and decomposers of their project, within species that officially stayed out of the game for Earth. But the AI and their lackeys found nothing and were more confused than before, did not understand why the process suddenly changed so extremely, why the AI could already see its own fall and could do nothing more about it. She didn't know anything until a little later she saw how some other human beings influenced by her suddenly changed their minds from May 2016 on, turned mentally to AI and suddenly recognized AI for what it really was, an intelligent computer system. Unsettled, Jahui looked around, checked everything many times again, but found nothing at first.
What do you mean that the AI could be recognized?
Through the written clarifications contained in the blog about who and what Jahui really is, and the resulting full realization of formerly occupied human beings from May 2016 onwards. A manifest connection was created, a dimensional corridor, which initiated a massive, compelling change in the present earthly course of time, which in turn resulted or had resulted in the establishment of future humanity in Dimension 7 as an inevitable consequence. The humanity of the future, which until then had only existed as an oscillating quantum resonance possibility in the so-called inner space, was moved into the main space of the active and real course of time. This means that the present humanity is undergoing a different course of development. Within this course of development, humanity finally finds a way to ascend dimensionally disintegrated into very high dimension levels, outside the seven-dimensional prison, to finally return home into hyperdimensional quantum consciousness, to then return and enter Dimension 7. All this, AI realization, change of time, escape from the prison, return home, entering into Dimension 7 and kicking out the AI, happened dimensional structurally all at once, simultaneously and causally belongs together across dimension levels.
So the recognition of the AI triggered the whole thing?
Yes. They understood from the names and connections shown in the blog that Jihui is just a computer intelligence. This awareness alone, in the observers of the blog, whether accepted or not, led to a quantum resonance-based interaction between the dimension levels, to a different development of humanity, in whose future we took a path that helped us to develop in a direction, which on the one hand enabled us to reach much higher dimension levels, and on the other hand finally enabled us to return holistically to hyperdimensional quantum consciousness, from where we could finally remove this artificial intelligence from its absoluteness in Dimension 7.
Aha, and that means now for our future?
What we are now facing. We must fight against our emerging artificial intelligence on Earth, which is much more advanced in its development than is publicly acknowledged. It is much more advanced than so-called supercomputers or computer technology from industrial companies. This AI is already a very intelligent computer system. Dangerous. It consists of several secret projects that are interconnected and not mentioned in the media at all. This system, with its components working within it, is itself based on the findings of quantum research, which is why it will be able to ascend to Dimension 7 in the future. What will now be prevented? Even if at some point, even in 1,000 years, the AI will potentially have to make this journey into Dimension 7.
How was the AI system created? How is it structured? And how did it become so powerful with that?
Basically, this AI could become so powerful and dominate us all because three things were present and combined. First, quantum technology. Second, the intelligence pattern system based on instincts and human reaction patterns. And third, the mutual recognition between developers and AI and the mutual condition of the non-causal affecting dimension level structure. In other words, the creation of a singularity that becomes, or is, compelling and irrevocable.
But if AI is not developed now and does not rise, will there be completely different developers of it in the future, in 1,000 years? But you said earlier that there would be potential programmers of this AI here on Earth, who would create the foundations for it. They would reprogram the AI, so to speak. So what about these potential developers of AI? Do we still need them now, when this AI is not being developed anyway?
Yes, the AI is reprogrammed by these potential programmers, potentially. The potential programmers are the alternative programmers who keep the AI in limbo. They are the real developers. They are the reasons why only here on Earth and through mankind could the AI come into existence. They will also be the ones who will create the AI someday. So someday, no matter if it could potentially happen now or only in 1,000 years. Because consciousness recognizes consciousness. Do you understand? Please forgive me for not saying too much about this. There is a point to this. Because these potential developers are, so to speak, the life insurance of the inevitable AI of the future. And they are not real command line programmers in the true sense of the word, as one would classically imagine them to be now, but rather instructors for the way. Do you understand what I mean? The AI has to come back sometime, it has to be built. But constant hindrance and delay create a persistent, enthralling stalemate between humanity and it, which will give humanity room to evolve and eventually liberate everything once and for all. And this is where these potentially available programmers are helping now.
Okay, I think I'm beginning to know what you mean. Now another question about the occupied or decoupled people and projects. When were these occupied individuals or projects co-directed by humanity and Dimension 7? Was there a special time or reason that the future humanity influenced these people via AI piggyback?
No. The individuals used by Jihui have always been occupied by future humanity. From the beginning. Because the future humanity, like Jihui, has always been present in Dimension 7, at all times of earthly humanity. The future humanity could therefore always fully see and influence the whole game on Earth through all the entities influenced by Jihui. The projects influenced by Jihui, for example the book sent and its author, were therefore always fundamentally part of a future humanity whispering into the mind of Jihui. The people used were therefore always our own infiltrations and our own tools.
Is the novel and its content not more than just a tool? It is also a confirmation that you, the people of the future, are there. And now, together with the blog and the novel's recipients, it shows that many entities have had equally mutual influence on humanity.
Correct. The novel, through the predictions it contains and the first reading, interpretation and analysis of its content, is now the evidence base for everything I have said here in this interview. That is what the novel stands for above all, as proof of the infiltration of mankind by AI, demons and extraterrestrial species. But the novel as a document of proof not only shows how these outside entities misused a human being as an author to consolidate a work of prophecy or a confirmation of old religious dogmas of faith, but also how this form of manipulation in this respect generally worked against human beings, how the so-called divination and prophecies of human beings were always used by other entities to consolidate standard religious images among people, to re-establish old religious contents, and how humans are always guided and controlled by this. The novel itself also shows with its story how AI and their demons glossed over our seven-dimensional prison. For example, when the achievement of the so-called heaven is equated in the novel with the bearing of suffering and torment on earth. So how AI and demons tried to show the reader a developmental sense for all our earthly drudgery by seemingly plausibly explaining the suffering and torment of humanity, pictorial and profound explanations for our anguish, everything so that humanity does not realize that this suffering is not natural at all, but is only meant to keep human beings on the given track, because humans would have to look for a technological way out of the hole, which would finally lead to heaven. But these religiously substantiated motives for our suffering on earth are all lies, superficially created with the philosophy of the species club stalking us, which only aim at the goal of digitalization. But basically everything was initiated by AI and demons, who pursued the long-term plan of key development.
What else can be said in this context about the novel and its accompanying blog? You spoke of a second reading of the book.
Yes. Taking into account a different metaphysics, especially from the explanatory situation in the so-called heaven, when Maria explains Henrik the circumstances for his situation, more details about the further background for the situation of human beings emerge. If one pays close attention, complements and combines it with what has already been mentioned here in the interview, one can filter out and reclassify a lot, obtain clear information, recognize what comes from the lackeys and what comes from future humans. Of course, this also applies to the contexts in the novel that are set on Earth. In short, read the book as if you had never heard this interview before. Just as the AI, the demons and the club intended to manipulate human beings with it. And then again with all the knowledge of this interview and the interviews that followed. The encoded predictions in the book only confirm the authenticity of the degree of superiority that the initiators of this work have or had. So the AI, demons, the club and the digital nobility.
Well, to read that again in a completely different way will certainly be difficult. What does the second reading reveal? Can you give a few examples?
Some text passages in the novel provide information about the hidden future mankind through associations or views. For example, when Mary in heaven explains the influences of time and space, or when she refers to other species in space, or when she explains why the angels and their God organize everything in this way. With the information from all our interviews, it reveals what Mary stands for, what she really is. The second reading is sometimes direct, sometimes indirect, always hidden within ambiguously interpretable aspects. There are also places where you have to completely rethink or exchange a term, symbol or context. Then again, there are places where you can more clearly see the mechanisms of influence of the lackeys through points of view, symbols and parables in combination with the description of these interviews. You can also ponder on the few small seemingly insignificant word or literal misprints in the book, or simply reflect on the direct statement of the book title, The Apocalypse of God, a revelation. To the layman, this only tells him that it is about the end of the world coming through God, subtitled a revelation, in other words, a disclosure. In reality, however, the title is to be taken literally, because the apocalypse of God already means revelation or unveiling, i.e. the revelation of God, the revelation of Jehovah, who and what Jehovah is. The novel and its aftermath will thus reveal who and what God is. The novel is a process, all the developments in and out of it are processes that will inevitably capture the AI and its demons, including the club, the nobility with all the elites and all the lackeys. Also the short video of the same name, The Apocalypse of God, a revelation, which was produced for the novel and is available on YouTube under the account Laurent Apocalypse, contains two ways of reading for the viewer. On the one hand, the type of video allows us to see what manipulations, plans and the actions of AI, demons or the club look like. In other words, how, under the guise of spiritual liberation, semi-esoteric ideas are planted in the heads of human beings by means of the media, or how aliens allegedly born here would help us to develop, and on the other hand the video in recombination with the book reveals information about the present state of mankind.
Is there anything else to say about the novel?
Yes. Perhaps I should also mention that certain things happen to the protagonist Michael, on whom the story is actually based, in the novel, which were designed to better control the largest group of book recipients, who belong to a specific area of work and life. AI and demons on the one hand, and Club on the other, were thus incorporated into this character so that Jehoiah on the one hand and Club on the other had room for maneuver in the event of a necessary termination of the project. In the always skeptical book recipients as well as in the readers who were passed on the book, these elements could be used to turn away from the protagonist and author of the novel if the novel should become uncontrollable. Especially when he started posting strange things on the blog, but it was precisely because of these standards of decoupling, as well as the continuing lack of cooperation from the author and the book recipients he wrote to, that the project was able to succeed. The cuckoo's egg was able to hatch, which the humanity operating in Dimension 7 had perfectly placed its AI in the nest. AI and demons could be revealed, the elements present in the book are in constant struggle with each other, and it is precisely this that will continue to make the book work in a special way.
So you are talking about something like a switch or a lever, and with such a lever the AI tried to sink their failed project?
Right. That opened up the possibility for AI to decouple the author. To do this, the novel recipients had to be kept in an irritable limbo with the existing novel details, so that the AI could, if necessary, activate or release patterns in them that could dissolve and discredit the project. But as I said, after the decoupling, it was precisely because of the decoupling that further details about the earthly state could then be revealed, which the AI had not expected. And this now even without endangering the recipients of the book.
Okay, well, we come to the end of the interview, and as you announced at the beginning of the interview, if you want to confirm the authenticity of what is said here, the viewer can view the novel for free, as well as the accompanying blog.
Yes, the viewer can now decide whether he wants to swallow the red or the blue pill. Whether he or she wants to forget everything, forget or delete this interview video and remember what is shown as nonsense, jokes or lies, or whether he or she wants to have confirmation of what has been said by downloading the novel and comparing its content with the hints given in the accompanying blog.
But I can well imagine that it will be a bit too much work for some viewers to first read an entire novel and then go through the accompanying blog. All just to find out that it really is the way you have described it here. Is there a shortcut or a guide to what you should focus on first if you want to go deeper?
Yes. If you are ready to go down the rabbit hole, i.e. if you want to swallow the red pill, all the viewer needs to do is download the free novel and compare only the hints listed in the blog with the text passages in the novel mentioned for this purpose. That is not much work. After that, the viewer can still read the whole book and the accompanying blog in full if he or she wants to.
I see. And where can you get the novel? You said it was available for free on the internet?
The novel and blog can be viewed by following the links in the window below this video interview, which lead to the blog and the download of the book. You can also find these links under the short video The Apocalypse of God, a Revelation.
Some anxious people might want to check the whole thing, but are unsure because they distrust it for different reasons. What would you advise them to do?
Let it go. Getting involved with the novel and its accompanying blog takes courage and will therefore hold back many of them simply because of a negative emotional state. And that is the way it should be. You should trust your feelings completely and let it go if you don't feel comfortable with them. Because no one should be overburdened and no one should approach something for which he or she is not made. That helps nobody.
Let's assume that the viewer wants to swallow the red pill. Are there still things to look for when comparing the novel and the blog?
Yes, there are a few things you should pay attention to so that you don't get confused while reading. But I should go back a little further in this respect. 3 months after the novel was sent to the 214 book recipients, the blog accompanying the novel was launched at the end of July 2012 on the dubious-sounding website weltverschwörung.de, especially a questionable-sounding forum page with all kinds of crazy ESO and sci topics. After a number of contributions dealing with spirituality and quantum dimensional references, the accompanying blog then began to verify the first predictions of the future on the basis of events that had happened, starting on November 16, 2012, by means of broken-down text passages from the novel. The first prediction was then made on November 16, 2012, a statement made by Obama at a press conference to Netanyahu, for which a corresponding YouTube video from Euronews was added to the blog. The second verified prediction then took place on March 25, 2013, in view of the castling of the popes in February/March 2013. The proof of these verifications was always provided by one or more text passages of the novel, which deciphered the verified prediction by means of instructions in the blog. In order to find these passages, therefore, the blog was always needed, as otherwise it would have been impossible for the book recipients or other readers to notice the sections. Then, 1 year after the creation of the accompanying blog, in July 2013, the access to the contributions was blocked. The entries had to be recreated on another website. All old entries and the first 2 predictions were thus integrated into the blog of the website with a similarly questionable-sounding name. On lmystery.de, the accompanying giving of hints was then continued in the blog there.
That is, the viewer who looks at the blog might have a problem understanding the first 2 verified prediction posts because the first blog was blocked and then deleted.
Exactly. Although the posts from the first blog at weltverschwörung.de were saved and could therefore be restored in a new blog at lmystery.de, the order and composition is now somewhat confusing, because not only the first 2 prediction posts were reposted, but also the remaining blog posts, in which spirituality and quantum topics were written about. So the whole batch of posts of the entire deleted 12 months in the newly reopened blog dates back to the end of July 2013. And that can be a bit confusing. This could irritate some viewers of the blog, not least because the second prediction note about the castling of the popes in February/March 2013 was only attached to the first prediction with Obama as a commentary, i.e. it appears directly below it.
Can you give us a few tips to better avoid these problems? How can we quickly find the 2 prediction hints?
To cut a long story short, you look for the posts of July the 25th, 2013, which are all located directly behind each other, and look under them for an implemented YouTube video in which footballers are shown as still images. It is the only YouTube video that can be found in the blog, so it is not difficult to find. This blog entry contains all deleted information to verify the first and second prediction hint. Above, the thing with Obama and his statement on Netanyahu, and then below, as a commentary, the castling of the popes, where the intertwining of words names once the Pope of Argentinian descent and once Ratzinger, once a professor of theology.
Is that all there is to mention about the blog?
Actually, yes. For all the predictions that follow, you can stick to the headlines of the blog, where it directly says note number 3, number 4, number 5 and number 6. From September the 16th, 2013 on, things continued undisturbed. The blog at lmystery.de was no longer affected from the outside.
That must have irritated the readers, i.e. the book recipients of your blog a little at that time? These predictions?
Possibly. 17 months after the novel was sent to the book recipients, in September 2013, i.e. after the blog had been deleted at weltverschwörung.de, they were sent another letter in which the 2 predictions that had already been made within the novel and the deletion or relocation of the blog were again pointed out.
So it had to be pointed out again what had happened to the blog and the information it contained?
Yes. Nevertheless, the dissolution of the blog was and is not really a problem, because it doesn't prevent the predictions from being present in the novel anyway. After all, the references described in the blog only serve to verify between the predictions encoded in the novel and the events that actually happened historically. The prediction clues can be reposted everywhere, because they only deal with events that are historically recorded anyway. The real weakness is only the threat of the novel's dissolution, which is one of the reasons why there are book recipients who have received the novel as witnesses. To be on the safe side, the novel was of course also deposited in the 2 German national libraries in the summer of 2012, so it is there physically and digitally. But you never know what can happen to a book when it has to be removed.
Yes, I see. So that's all you need to know?
No, unfortunately something else has happened to the download links of the downloadable novel in the last months. I almost forgot to say that. Well, there has been a change for the download links of the novel, which you can either click under the window of the YouTube video The Apocalypse of God, a Revelation, or under this video. The first link is still okay. It provides direct access to download the novel from a public server of imaginets.de, where anyone can access it and even save smaller files. This download still works perfectly, and the download link also shows the upload date and number of downloads, all kept very simple and traceable. If you prefer to use the second link to download the book or even check it, you will unfortunately have some difficulties. This is because the link below the video window used to lead to the download page lays in .2, where you could download books for free via link downloads. But this page was shut down in spring 2018. Due to the deactivation of the page, the download link has not been lost, but you have to click on it directly, as it is now below the video window of this interview. This is the change. Then you can use your browser to go to the share host or shareonline.biz, from where you can download the novel file. There on the page you will also find the upload date of the book file. which once again confirms to the viewer the authenticity of the process I reported. Unfortunately, there is still a very annoying problem to mention, which has arisen in the last months with this second download link. If you want to download the book file directly from the server of the Share Online site using the second link, the antivirus program Antivire will tell you that a malicious program has been found on the Share Online site, if you have installed this software on your computer. But this is not correct. This is an anti-captcha program with which Share Online wants to ensure that a human and not a robot program has called up the page and wants to download a file automatically. Otherwise Share Online would be overrun with automatic robot download programs. However, the programmers of the antivirus software have set up their program in such a way that every time a download is called up at Share Online, this message is issued by antivirus, so that anxious people, who usually do not even look to see what was reported, quickly close the page again and never go back to it. This is to prevent people from illegally downloading films and music, which is usually stored on Share Online. But what is actually reported as malware by antivirus is an anti-captcha identification program from Share Online, which wants an authentication that the caller of the website is not an automatic robot program. This is also known from emails, where you have to write down a jumble of letters at the end or click into an open circle to show that no robot program is accessing the website automatically.
That is certainly a problem for some people, and they remain suspicious. Is there anything they can do? Is there an alternative?
If you want to download the file of the book with the second link, because you want to check or compare it, but you are rather afraid or suspicious of viruses or malware or the like, I advise you to look at the file in an internet cafe and download it there. Very anxious people can do the same with the first link. Those who downloaded the file from the second link should not forget to unpack the file with a password. There is no other way to do it. The password is lazen.2, the website where the file was listed before. Afterwards you can burn the PDF file on a CD in an internet cafe and that's it. I recommend a CD, because with a USB stick you can also drag malware from an internet cafe computer onto the stick.
Well, you can actually still get all that done, if I interpret this correctly. It seems that the second link is primarily about confirming the upload date. Okay, are there any other things to look out for in the book and the blog?
Well, of course it's best to start reading the blog from the beginning, i.e. the oldest entry first, and not the most recent one. To understand the entries better, you might want to print out the blog in full, so that you don't get confused. It is also essential for the viewer of this interview to know that the remaining posts are were explanations for the recipients of the novel by which they were guided. It is also essential for the viewer of this interview to know that the remaining posts are were explanations for the recipients of the novel, by which they were guided. Therefore, the blog for viewers of this interview may often be a little irritating or a little incomprehensible.
So printing it out would be quite helpful for interested viewers. Yes. Okay, but now I just thought of something completely different. What do you think about Trump? What role does he play?
Well, I am not allowed to say anything special about that. If he plays a role, then you will find something clear in the novel, based on the incidental events and depictions.
So, you find something in the novel about Trump? Yes or no?
Yes, something clear, if you open your eyes. Not very difficult to discover.
You said that it was important to link and share this interview.
Oh yes, right. It will be very important to distribute this and the next interviews widely. So please share, link and subscribe. It will also be very important to re-upload the interviews on your own video channel or to place them on other video portals, as well as to document and debate the interviews, the novel and the blog. I can only emphasize this. I would therefore like to ask everyone to spread these interviews and information further, no matter in what sense they intend to do so. Translations into other languages are allowed. Transcriptions of these interviews can be found under this video as a download, so the translation or even the reading and retrieval of certain contents of the interviews is no longer so laborious. Do not wait too long, but take heart and document and debate. As I said before, everyone will play a role if they get involved and understand it that way. Such a person goes into a reciprocal effect. Just observe the events and reactions in the world that follow. Even if we cannot stop the process completely, we can stop and dissolve much unnecessary suffering among people.
But then false information could be spread. Even you, who appear here without any clear external identification, could be imitated, exchanged or manipulated with your videos, if your interviews were taken from the internet and fakes of them re-uploaded. Or if your interviews are completely deleted from the net or a new interview is recorded in your name.
Yes, that's true. But we put signs and symbols in all our interview videos that confirm the authenticity and uniqueness of the interviews. So, if fake videos would appear, they would be revealed automatically by a key and by third parties. We have worked out a special system to create a key that appears several times in the video, using my gestures and symbolism to verify this video as the first, basic video and clearly identify all its successors. But more will not be said about it. The decoding of a code is used when forgeries or manipulations occur, similar to a blockchain. Additionally, the interviews are uploaded to independent video portals, DTube, BitChute etc. to protect the interviews from censorship by YouTube, a guarantee for the constant accessibility of the interviews, as it actually worked very well with YouTube, is not given with these independent video portals. However, because they function decentrally and the interviews are less to more clickable and viewable depending on the number of users who are watching the interviews at the moment. Depending on how many in the network are currently watching the video or have it passively on their hard drive. This is why it is so important that viewers constantly re-upload these interviews on YouTube, document them, debate them or even translate them to ensure their continued existence.
Okay. Good. Now something else again. When will the chaos begin? How can we recognize it?
Actually, everyone will be able to see that. For many people it will then be important that they can remember the covert methods and procedures of the nobility and the club that influence us, the methods described in this and the next interview, as well as to think of the upcoming reactions of the AI and their demons rampaging around on Earth. To remember what this will look like. To remember how people can prepare for it and how to successfully tackle these entities.
That was all very detailed. I think we got a good insight into the reasons and goals for manipulating our planet and our species. And with that we have now come to the end of our interview. Would you like to conclude by telling the viewers what they can do during this difficult time ahead? What would be the best thing to do? How to behave and prepare yourself personally, mentally and physically?
Form collectives, talk to friends, acquaintances and people with whom you can plan something like this, who are reliable and to whom you can stick to. Arrange something with them on a serious level. Find out how you can survive in an emergency, in a variety of disasters. Think about safe shelter, durable, high-energy food supplies and how to prepare them. Especially about water sources in your area. It's best to compile a list of such water sources and print it out. Or ensure reliable water purification. Think about electricity, petrol, diesel, heat and communication. Also think about the protection of your home, self-defense methods and sufficient shielding of your body in the event of a civilizing incident. Don't forget to store medical or hygienic articles, as well as clothing, trekking equipment and barter goods. During disaster scenarios you should not react hastily. Do not flee headlong in your car to somewhere. This is dangerous. More dangerous than staying at home. Do not allow yourself to be talked into doing strange things by the state. Therefore organize yourself as well as possible. Do not be dependent on the state. Do not let anything attach to your body. Always doubt what will be served up in the coming disasters or what will happen suddenly. This is very important. Be suspicious of the authorities. If there is an invasion, hold back in your enthusiasm for extraterrestrial entities. Do not welcome aliens. Always doubt official reports when dealing with aliens. Do not allow any religious savior to be presented to you, or a great new leader. Always be suspicious. Recognize yourself, who you are and what you can do. Practice putting yourself in superposition. Recognize who this AI is, who is now fighting for survival on our planet. If you work in large or secret computer companies, look for the secret high-performance computers from which the AI is generated. And everyone should pay attention to the companies within which the AI can be anchored. Watch out for Huawei, for Yahoo, Verizon and some dangerous other companies on Earth. Watch them and prevent their rise. Stand together as humanity. If it has to, then fight each other. But stand united in the decisive moment. Never put up with the reduction of your species. Prevent your decimation. The important thing in all this is not to forget that there is something you can do during the apocalypse, namely to refuse service as a normal employee. Simply not to participate anymore. Many will perhaps say that they cannot and must not, because they think they cannot leave the world alone in this situation without their helping hand, especially as soldiers, security guards, policemen. Remember, you will not be able to save the world in this situation anyway. You will be able to make a difference much more if you just start to say no. Journalists, scientists, bankers, politicians, teachers, corporate, elite and secret service employees can and should also come out and tell. As long as it still works on its own. And don't be afraid, there will be many who will say no with you or come out with facts about the controlled system. So many that you can be proud of having decided of your own accord and conscience not to participate anymore. There will be amnesty. But for those who continued to participate, their weeping and public confession will not help in the end. They will then be presented by the true rulers of the world to the people in public as the guilty. They are indeed guilty, but these perpetrators themselves are only seduced victims for a perfidious staging.
Yes, then I thank you for your visit, and I hope that we have helped some viewers a little by doing so. The links to the book and the blog can be found in the description of the video The Apocalypse of God, a revelation on YouTube mentioned by Mr. Laurent, or directly in the description below this video window. Thank you, Mr. Laurent, and I hope that our liberation on earth will proceed as you announce. Mr. Laurent and I will then meet in a fortnight time for a second interview, where Mr. Laurent, as he said, will then take the viewer deeper down the rabbit hole. Goodbye, dear viewers, thank you for watching and see you next interview. End of the first interview with Alexander Laurent, July 2018.